Well, today I'm joined by Jivaan Bennett, a good friend of mine. So great to have you with us. Jivaan, we're going to have a little bit of a chit chat today about all things money. I guess let's start off with a little bit about you, Jivaan. So, for people listening, tell us a little bit about your career, sort of what you do today. And if you can, sort of briefly, how did you get there?
Yeah, so thanks, Carla. Thanks for having me, first of all. It's great to be invited onto your show. So, I'm a senior associate in the litigation, arbitration, and investigations group at Linklaters. I sit between our London offices and New York and work with both teams. Prior to joining Links, I came to the UK to study many years ago, longer than I'd like to admit. And like you, did an English law and French law degree at King's College London, and then got called to the bar. I returned to Trinidad and Tobago, which is where I'm from, and spent a few years there working as a tax lawyer at PwC, also similar to you, been following in your footsteps. And then after that, came back to London to study for my master's in international tax law, again at King's College London. And yeah, decided to stay, fell in love with your lovely British weather, and decided that this would be the place for me. When I got a training contract at Linklaters, and I've been there since 2016, initially in the tax team as a corporate tax lawyer working on transactions and advisory matters, and more recently working in the dispute resolution team on contentious tax-related matters.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks. So I guess, I got to ask a question. Whenever you moved to the UK, I guess you probably had to deal with managing money in the UK for the first time. And were the stuff that just came as a surprise to you? Was the stuff that was really different, or was it pretty much like kind of same as home? But
oh no, I mean, I'm sure a lot of foreigners do this as well. When you get here, initially you'll be converting in your head. So, I'd go to the supermarket and look at a pint of milk and be thinking, wow,
fall off
this
your chair.
costs so much because it's much cheaper back at home. So yeah, I think, dealing with a different currency for starters and understanding that aspect of it was initially a bit of a shock. But afterwards, I think the other general issues that come with managing one's salary, we have pretty steep increases in salary from the trainee solicitor role to the associate role. I think making that transition was, very important, but equally could be challenging in terms of one's money journey.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that I know from firsthand experience myself, just going from being sort of at the very beginning of your career, and oftentimes there's a sort of promotion period where you see a big jump in your salary. And actually, something I hear a lot from people that I talk to is like, oh, that temptation at that moment to go, do I just spend it? Or do I start doing something different, right? So tell me, are there times in your career thus far where you've gone, do you know what? I'm earning a bit more money. I'm just going to enjoy life a bit more. Or have you always been someone who's been a bit of a saver and investor?
A bit of both. I know that's a bit of a cop-out in terms of an answer, but I think I've tried as best as possible to be responsible. But equally, I think the hours that we work, the stresses of the job, one needs to enjoy oneself. And that may not necessarily mean spending money in an irresponsible way. But equally, if there are things that I particularly want and I feel as though I've worked really hard, I may decide to spoil myself from time to time.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And I guess, what's your strategy then when you're thinking about those things? So, oftentimes lawyers get big bonuses, or at least the promise of a big bonus.
I wish I was one of those lawyers.
Well, that's the myth we were always told over in accounting.
Waiting for it to happen.
But let's say you get a bonus payment in the year. Are you the guy that sort of spent the money in advance and is paying down the credit card, or are you waiting for the bonus to hit the bank account before you're spending it?
So I got burnt with that 1 year before I joined Linklaters. I remember at one of my previous employers already planning how I was going to spend my bonus. I already made commitments, only to find out to my surprise that there would be no bonus that year because the department hadn't performed as expected. And I actually felt robbed. I felt violated because I felt as though money had been taken out of my account, when in fact that probably wasn't the right way to approach it. So now I think my approach is to wait until the money lands in my account, and then I'll decide how I want to deal deal with it. I do think before I get a bonus, what I will generally do in my mind is divide it into specific percentage tranches in terms of what I would do with a bonus if I got one. But having had that experience at a previous employer, I try to avoid getting my expectations up until I'm quite sure that there will be a bonus.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think, what you just described in terms of sitting down and thinking about what is it that I need and what is it I just want? I mean, I love that as a practice and a habit. Is that something you do regularly?
Definitely. I think moving to a foreign country, not having the support of family here, for example, I don't have family members here in the UK. I think it helps me realize that I need to be self-sufficient. And for that reason, I try to be as responsible as I can with my financial affairs. I definitely employ that approach where I decide what are the things I need, what are absolute essentials, what are the things I want. And then even looking at things I want, I ask myself, is there any sort of emotional attachment to a certain thing? So if, for example, there's something that I can achieve without necessarily spending money in terms of getting the same sentiment or the same feeling that I would get in spending the money, then I'd, opt for the option that involves spending less money.
I love the fact that you've thought enough about it to connect the emotional side of the equation to it. Because actually, I think this is I think if we all pause, we realize just how much of our financial behaviors are driven by emotions.
Yes. Okay.
Right. But actually, there's so many of us, and I've been guilty of this myself, that you go through life not really taking account of that or not really observing your own behaviors through that lens. And you just think, okay, well, I've got to do this and I'm doing this because that's what I do, or that's what my friends are doing, or that's what's expected of me. Actually, sometimes when you dig underneath it, you realize, well, I'm doing it because there's an emotional driver, right? Maybe it is because I'm a bit lonely and I want to go and be sociable, and nothing wrong with that, right? But it's about identifying some of those emotional behaviors and patterns that are forcing you or maybe persuading you to do things. And, good ones could be I'm feeling a bit lonely. Actually, I do want to spend money to go out and socialize and be around other people. Maybe a less positive one, and again, I'm guilty, is the doom scrolling at night on your iPhone and sort of like mindlessly, buying the shiny, pretty thing that pops up on your Instagram page. Yeah. And again, I'm not here to judge people for that because we've all been there and done it. But it's about being able to sort of pause and recognize that and say, okay, well, look, what's going on there? And are there other ways I could sort of complete that emotional equation that I'm looking for, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I love that. So you mentioned just there, obviously, moving to the UK, not necessarily having family here to support you on that journey that you were going through in terms of learning. So who did you turn to, or what did you turn to learn? Is that something you just sort of read about or, learned about money management yourself, or were you drawing on some early childhood experiences that you were actually taking with you?
I think, drew a lot from early childhood experiences in terms of particularly looking at how my mother managed finances in the home, convinced that she has and still has some sort of superpowers in order to be able to manage the finances in the way that she did growing up. So I think that came in very handy, always having some money put aside for a rainy day. One example, I know we'll probably get to talking about what do you do when your salary lands at the end of the month. Like one of the things, for example, is in terms of when my salary gets paid, for example, for this July, I'll put that to my expenses for September. And that's because August's expenses have already come out from June's salary. So that there's always a 1 month buffer in between when salary hits the account and when it needs to go out.
That is genius.
But no, you see, the thing is, you never know what could happen, right?
Absolutely.
Always plan for the worst. If there's some sort of IT software failure, for example, and salaries are not paid on time, if something happens at the bank and your direct debit doesn't come out on time, when it comes out earlier than when your salary is paid. These things would happen, sad to say, are very often back at home. So one always had to be prepared. So I think I'd use those sort of techniques and tactics, for want of a better word, to sort of prepare for, how I will arrange my finances at the end of each month.
Amazing. So yeah, so let's get into the detail then. So you've already planned for the month ahead. I love that. So actually, when you're getting your payday money, you're looking 2 months out, and you're thinking, okay, well, I know I've got rent or food costs, bills, all that stuff. How do you go about figuring out where you're going to put your money? Do you use a spreadsheet? Are you a budgeter, or are
I
you kind
love
of
a
like
spreadsheet.
you do?
Yeah, I have a spreadsheet for many things in life. I actually have a spreadsheet for my spreadsheets. I don't know
Oh,
what the
really?
different
Wow.
spreadsheets are. Yeah. So yeah, I use a spreadsheet, and I think most people do, at least hope most people do, put aside what are the essentials, what do I, my fixed costs each month, recurring expenditure, things such as mortgage, my bills, council tax, food, whatever it may be. So that goes into one pot. I also use multiple bank accounts. I think very fortunate that banks no longer send us paper statements, because I think there'd be, a forest somewhere in the Amazon that would owe its extinction to me, because I would have, multiple bank statements coming each month.
And you're using those for very specific jobs. So does each account have a specific job? Is that how you've set it up?
Yeah. So each account, I think, for me, if I can't see it, I can't spend it.
Yeah.
So, there are accounts for the essentials, accounts for vacation. That's very important. There are accounts for various different things, for saving, accounts for investments, or at least investment holding accounts. So, various different accounts, each with different features. For example, saving account may be an account that has a high interest rate. There are also the ISAs as well. So yeah, it's about, for me at least, trying to be very organized with it at the start of the month, so that I don't let emotion get into it. I don't see my salary and think, oh, I'd like to do this, but no, there's already a plan. So in terms of approach, we'd get our pay slips probably a week before the salary lands. Now, generally, you'd know what you'd get each month. It's around the same amount, but I like to have a look at the pay slip before and start planning before the money actually hits my account. And so on the day when it does hit the account, there's no internal discussion about what we're going to do. We've already decided that, X amount is going into this account, so that, yeah, it makes life much simpler for me, at least.
Yeah, yeah. And I can relate to the feeling that if you can't see it, you can't spend it. I think that's a tactic I've employed. Let me ask you this. It sounds like you're incredibly organized, and I love that. It's something I think...
I'm glad you think that.
Oh, I know. I do. I mean, listen, there's plenty of people who I know, and I used to be one of these people, certainly at the beginning of my career. No planning whatsoever, spent it. And if there was stuff left over, happy days. And if there wasn't, oopsies. So, I've learned from those mistakes. But I think this is fantastic in terms of the level of detail you've gone. Let me ask you this. Are you budgeting for fun? You mentioned vacations. What other things?
Well, fun's the most important thing, right? After you've paid the essentials.
Yeah.
And fun could look, it could be different things, right? It doesn't have to be the same amount each month, for example. For me, for example, during the winter months, I know I'll put aside more money to do fun things, because I every year get more homesick. I know it sounds weird. You'd think I'd get less homesick as time has gone by, but I actually get more homesick year in, year out. And so therefore, I think it's really important to have fun. I mean, if you're not having fun, what's the point of it all?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. So listen, that's fantastic. You've shared so much insight. I'm going to ask you one last question, Jivaan, just to wrap things up, which is, if you were going to sort of share a lesson or something that you've learned along the way, if there was one thing that you could impart to someone who's at the start of their career, that you could say, look, this would save you time, effort, and a lot of headache along the way, what's that thing you would pass on to them?
I'm not sure this is good financial advice, but I would say don't stress. Relax, have fun, be responsible with your finances, of course, as best as you can. But I think people talk about wanting to have more life and to live longer. I'm not sure how many people at the age of 100 would agree with that, right? I think your youth is something that you don't get back, and you want to really make the most of it. So even if that may mean not necessarily being always as strict as you would like with your finances for the sake of having fun, I actually would endorse that. But like I say, I'm probably not the best person to ask for financial advice on this particular topic.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely, we should just, say the disclaimer again. We're not here to give financial advice. This is podcast to share money stories and experiences and different points of view. And I think there's something to be said for what you just described. In fact, Wealthbrite we did some research at the beginning of the year, talking to junior lawyers about their experiences and what was on their mind. And, it's striking to me, 80% of the people who spoke to us told us they were worrying about money every day. And that's a heavy burden to bear. So I think, I'm all for intentional spending plans. I don't like the language of restrictive diets or budgeting in a way that makes you feel like you can't do anything, right?
Yeah.
I think, we got to really flip that script a little bit and say, actually, what this is about is saying, okay, what do you absolutely need? And then what do you want? What's the shape of your life that you're looking for? And how can you structure your money and your finances in a way to give you what you want? And for sure, I think, some of what you've just described in terms of the different bank accounts, spending a bit of time thinking about it in advance.
Yeah, it really takes the emotion out of it. I think that's really interesting statistic that there's so many lawyers that worry about it. So we're going through a cost of living crisis. Lawyers are still generally one of the better paid professions. So one wonders, what is the cause of this worry? I suppose if I can sneak in a second piece of advice, unsolicited, we say back at home, don't have a champagne taste on a Coca-Cola budget, right? If you got, you got Coca-Cola money, don't be wanting champagne. And I wonder to what extent some persons who are in quite highly paid professions find that their money worries stem from perhaps overextending in terms of what are their desires. Now, of course, there are other persons who, that simply doesn't apply to. But I think if that's an area where there's an opportunity to do some internal discussion and some introspection on whether there's any scope for cutting back on one's desires, perhaps that might be helpful in alleviating that anxiety.
So, actually, we did ask people that question whenever we spoke to them, and we were really surprised by the answers, because nearly a half of all the junior lawyers that we spoke to said that they felt some pressure to spend beyond their means. But actually, I think the other thing that came through was just a general sense of overwhelm, right? Feeling that, we're not taught money in school. They maybe don't have friends and family they can rely on. And actually, it's quite difficult sometimes to know what information can you trust. There's a lot of information out there. So how can you navigate that and be certain that stuff you're pulling on in terms of resources are actually going to be good quality and helpful? So, I think this point about structuring your money in a way that's going to allow you to live your life to the fullest is a great piece of advice to pass on to people. And just actually, acknowledging the fact that, yes, you're getting paid well. Yes, there's so much you could be doing. And we want to have fun, but we want to do it in a way where we don't have this sort of lifestyle inflation, as I'd call it, because actually it can come back to bite you.
Yeah, and I know I'm guilty of that, definitely. Yeah, it's very easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah. Well, listen, Jivaan, this has been so great. I'm so thankful for you for spending some time with us today. I think there was loads in what you shared that other people can probably relate to and sort of learn from. And just last thing to say is thanks very much.
No, thanks for having me again, Carla.